What happens when Hollywood's most genuine star walks into what should be a simple morning interview, only to face the kind of disrespect that no guest should ever endure? It only took one comment from Sam Champion to turn a routine appearance into the most explosive moment in Good Morning America history. Mark Wahlberg arrived at the studio that morning with the kind of energy that made him one of the most beloved figures in entertainment. He was there to talk about his latest film, his charity work, and his family. Simple stuff, the kind of interview he had done hundreds of times before. But what he didn't know was that Sam Champion had something else planned. Something that would test every ounce of Mark's patience. The cameras started rolling, and Robin Roberts opened with her usual warm smile. "We are so excited to have Mark Wahlberg here with us this morning. Mark, welcome back to Good Morning America." Mark smiled and nodded. "Thanks for having me, Robin. Always great to be here." George Stephanopoulos jumped in next. "So Mark, tell us about the new film. We hear it's quite different from your usual action roles." "Yeah, I wanted to try something that really challenged me as an actor," Mark explained, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. "This character is dealing with some heavy family issues, trying to reconnect with his kids after making some mistakes. It felt real to me. It felt important." Laura Spencer smiled from her seat. "That sounds beautiful, Mark. And we know family is so important to you in real life, too." "Absolutely," Mark said. "My kids are everything to me. Being a dad is the most important role I'll ever have." That's when Sam Champion decided to insert himself into the conversation. His tone was different from the others. There was an edge to it, a smugness that immediately shifted the energy in the room. "Well, Mark, speaking of roles," Sam said with a smirk, "some people might say you're playing a role right now. This whole family man image. I mean, we all remember your past, don't we?" The studio went quiet. Robin's smile faltered. George shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Laura looked down at her notes as if hoping this moment would pass quickly. Mark's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Sam, I've never hidden my past. I've been open about the mistakes I made when I was young. I've worked hard to become a better person." Sure, Sam said, waving his hand dismissively. "But don't you think it's a little convenient? You do a few charity events, talk about faith and family, and suddenly everyone forgets who you really are." "Sam," Robin interjected, trying to steer things back, "I think what Mark has done to turn his life around is actually really inspiring to a lot of people." But Sam wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair with an arrogant grin. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Robin. We all know Hollywood is full of people who reinvent themselves for the cameras. Mark's just better at it than most." Mark's eyes narrowed. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Sam, I don't know what your problem is this morning, but I came here to talk about my work and the causes I care about. If you want to attack my character, maybe you should take a good look at your own first." George tried to jump in. "Let's all just take a breath here. Mark, why don't you tell us more about your charity work with at-risk youth?" "I'd love to, George," Mark said, his eyes still locked on Sam. "I work with kids who've made mistakes, just like I did. Kids who need someone to believe in them. Kids who deserve a second chance." Sam laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, here we go. The redemption speech. How many times have we heard this one?" Laura spoke up, her voice firm. "Sam, that's enough. Mark is our guest, and he deserves respect." "Respect?" Sam shot back. "I'm just being honest. Something this show used to value before we started treating every celebrity like their royalty." Mark stood up. Not aggressively, but decisively. He removed his microphone with steady hands. "You know what, Sam? I've sat through a lot of interviews. I've dealt with tough questions. I've been challenged by some of the best journalists in the world. But I've never sat across from someone who's confused being rude with being honest." Robin stood as well, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mark, please. We didn't know this was going to happen. Sam doesn't speak for all of us." I know you don't, Robin, Mark said gently, and I appreciate that. But I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected on national television. I have too much respect for myself and for the people who actually care about the work I'm doing. Sam crossed his arms, that smug expression still plastered on his face. So you're just going to run away? Can't handle a little criticism? Mark turned to face Sam directly. His voice was quiet, but powerful. Criticism would be asking me tough questions about my work, about my choices, about the impact I'm trying to make. What you're doing is just tearing someone down to make yourself feel important, and I don't have time for that. George stood up now too, clearly trying to salvage the situation. Mark, we value you as a guest. Please, let's start over. Let's talk about the film, about your foundation, about anything you want. I appreciate that, George. I really do, Mark said, his voice softening. But the damage is done. Sam made it clear what kind of interview this was going to be, and I made a promise to myself a long time ago that I wouldn't let anyone treat me like I'm less than I am. Laura was shaking her head in disbelief. Mark, on behalf of the show, I am so sorry. This isn't how we do things here. I know it isn't, Laura, Mark replied. You've always been kind to me. You all have, except for him. Sam finally stood, his arrogance turning to anger. You think you're better than me? You think because you made a few movies and donated some money that you're some kind of saint? I never said I was a saint, Sam, Mark responded, his patience clearly wearing thin. But at least I'm trying. At least I'm putting in the work to be better. What are you doing besides sitting in that chair, judging people you don't even know? The production staff was frozen. Camera operators didn't know whether to keep filming. The director was frantically speaking into headsets. This had gone completely off the rails. Robin tried one more time. Please, both of you. This isn't productive. Mark, you're right that you deserve respect. Sam, I think you owe Mark an apology. Sam scoffed. An apology? For what? For asking the questions that needed to be asked? For not kissing up to another Hollywood phony? That was the final straw. Mark's expression hardened. You know what the sad thing is, Sam? I actually respected you. I watched you do weather reports for years. I thought you seemed like a decent guy. But this is just pathetic. You're trying to make a name for yourself by tearing me down, and it's not going to work. I don't need to make a name for myself, Sam snapped back. I've been on television longer than you've been making movies. Then act like it, Mark said firmly. Act like someone who's earned their place, not like someone who's desperate for attention. George put his hand up. Okay, that's enough from both of you. Mark, no one would blame you if you wanted to leave. Sam, I think you need to seriously reconsider your approach here. Mark grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. I'm done here, Robin, Laura, George. It was good to see you all. I'm sorry this turned into what it did. Sam couldn't resist one more jab. Typical. When things get real, you Hollywood types always run. Mark stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, and for the first time, there was real fire in his eyes. You want real, Sam? Here's real. I grew up on the streets. I made mistakes that I'll regret for the rest of my life. I hurt people. I disappointed my family. But I owned it. I did the work. I changed. And now I spend my time trying to help kids avoid the same mistakes I made. That's real. What you're doing right now, hiding behind a desk and throwing insults at someone you've never taken the time to understand, that's cowardice. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sam seemed momentarily stunned into silence. Robin's voice was barely above a whisper. Mark, that was beautifully said. Thanks, Robin, Mark said, his voice returning to its normal calm. But I think I've said enough for one morning. Laura stood and walked over to Mark. Can I walk you out? I'd appreciate that, Mark said with a small smile. As they headed toward the exit, Sam called out one last time. You're making a mistake walking out of here. This makes you look weak." Mark didn't even turn around this time. He just kept walking. But Laura stopped and looked back at Sam with disgust. "No, Sam. The only person who looks weak here is you." George was rubbing his temples, clearly mortified. "We're going to need to go to commercial. Now." As Mark and Laura disappeared through the studio doors, Sam sat back down in his chair, arms still crossed, that defiant expression refusing to fade even as Robin and George stared at him with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "What?" Sam said defensively. Someone had to ask the tough questions. Robin shook her head slowly. "Those weren't tough questions, Sam. That was a hit job. And you know it." "Mark Wahlberg is a public figure," Sam argued. "He doesn't get to just waltz in here and control the narrative." George's voice was ice cold. "This isn't about controlling the narrative. This is about basic human decency. Something you clearly forgot this morning." In the hallway outside the studio, Laura walked alongside Mark. "I am so sorry. I don't know what got into him." Mark sighed and managed a genuine smile. "It's not your fault, Laura. Some people are just looking for conflict. I've dealt with worse." "Still," Laura said, "you handled that with a lot more grace than he deserved." "I learned a long time ago that how people treat you says more about them than it does about you," Mark replied. "Sam showed everyone who he really is today. I'm just glad I didn't sink to his level." Laura gave him a quick hug. "For what it's worth, you have a lot of fans on this show, and we're all horrified by what just happened." "I know," Mark said, "and I appreciate that. But I think it's best if I don't come back for a while." "I understand," Laura said sadly. Back in the studio, the commercial break was ending. Robin, George, and the remaining team members looked shell-shocked. Sam sat there, still trying to justify his behavior. "We need to address what just happened," Robin said to the cameras as they came back live. "Our interview with Mark Wahlberg took an unexpected turn, and we want to apologize to our viewers and to Mark for how things unfolded." Sam shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. George added, "Mark Wahlberg is a talented actor and a dedicated philanthropist. He deserved better than what happened here this morning." The producers were already in damage control mode, but the truth was undeniable. Mark Wahlberg had walked onto that set as a gracious guest, and he'd been ambushed by a host with an agenda. He'd kept his dignity, stood his ground, and walked away on his own terms. In his dressing room, Mark was already on the phone with his manager. "Yeah, it got ugly, but I'm fine. I said what needed to be said." His manager's voice crackled through the speaker. "The clips are already going viral. People are on your side, Mark. They saw what happened." "Good," Mark said simply, "because I'm done pretending that being polite means letting people walk all over you." Meanwhile, Sam Champion sat in the makeup room during the next commercial break, scrolling through social media on his phone. The reaction was swift and brutal. Viewers were outraged. They were calling him arrogant, disrespectful, and out of line. His Twitter mentions were a disaster. The hashtag that was trending wasn't supporting him. It was supporting Mark. A producer knocked on the door. "Sam, we need to talk." Sam looked up, the reality of what he'd done finally starting to sink in. "I was just doing my job." "No," the producer said firmly. "You were being cruel, and it's going to have consequences." Back on set, Robin was trying to move forward with the show, but the energy was completely off. The crew was distracted. The other hosts were clearly upset, and the viewers at home were flooding the phone lines and social media with their opinions. George leaned over to Robin during another commercial break. "This is going to be a long day." "I know," Robin said quietly. "I just can't believe Sam did that. Mark has always been nothing but professional with us." Laura rejoined them, having said goodbye to Mark at the door. "He's gone, and honestly, I don't blame him one bit." "Did he say anything else?" George asked. "Just that he hoped we knew it wasn't about us," Laura replied. He made it very clear that his issue was with Sam, not with the show or the rest of us. Robin nodded. That's generous of him, considering he just got blindsided on live television. As the show continued, Sam tried to participate in the remaining segments, but his presence was now toxic. Every time he spoke, viewers could sense the tension. His co-hosts were giving him the cold shoulder. The chemistry that made Good Morning America work was completely shattered. During a cooking segment, Sam tried to make a joke, and it fell completely flat. The chef looked uncomfortable. Laura changed the subject immediately. George focused intently on his notes. By the time the show wrapped, the damage was done. Mark Wahlberg had walked off the set with his head held high. Sam Champion had revealed himself to be petty and mean-spirited, and Good Morning America had just broadcast one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. In the production meeting afterward, the executive producer addressed the team. What happened this morning was unacceptable. We pride ourselves on being a welcoming show, and we failed our guest today. Sam tried to speak up. I was just trying to ask real questions. No, the producer cut him off. You were trying to create a moment, and you did. Just not the kind of moment we want on this show. Robin spoke up. Mark Wahlberg has been a friend to this show for years. He's given us great interviews, been generous with his time, and always treated everyone here with respect. He deserved the same in return. George added, what bothers me most is that we had a chance to talk about his film, his charity work, his family, all things our viewers would have loved to hear about. Instead, we got a confrontation that helped no one. Laura was the most direct. Sam, I don't know what you were thinking, but you embarrassed all of us today. And more importantly, you disrespected a good man who was doing us a favor by being here. Sam sat there, his earlier bravado completely gone. The reality of what he'd done was settling in. He'd thought he was being bold, being the one willing to ask tough questions, but he'd crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Outside the studio, Mark Wahlberg climbed into his car and took a deep breath. His phone was blowing up with messages of support from friends, fellow actors, and fans who had watched the interview. People were praising him for standing up for himself, for not backing down, for handling the situation with class. His publicist called. Mark, everyone's talking about this. You're trending for all the right reasons. People are calling you a hero for walking out. I'm not a hero, Mark said simply. I just wasn't going to sit there and be disrespected. Life's too short for that. Well, the public agrees with you, his publicist continued. Sam Champion is getting destroyed online. Good Morning America is doing damage control. And you come out of this looking like the bigger person. Mark didn't care about any of that. He'd done what felt right in the moment. He'd protected his dignity. He'd stood up for himself without losing his temper or saying anything he'd regret. That was enough. As his car pulled away from the studio, Mark thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years. The good ones, the bad ones, the awkward ones. But this one would stick with him. Not because of what Sam had said, but because of how he'd responded. He'd learned a long time ago that you teach people how to treat you. And this morning, he'd taught Sam Champion and everyone watching that Mark Wahlberg wouldn't be anyone's punching bag. Not anymore. Not ever again. The fallout from the interview would continue for days. Think pieces would be written. Media analysts would debate what happened. But in that moment, driving away from the studio, Mark felt at peace. He'd handled it the right way. He'd been the bigger person, and he'd walked away with his integrity intact. Back at the studio, the Good Morning America team was left to pick up the pieces. They'd have to rebuild trust with their audience, address what happened with Sam, and figure out how to move forward. But one thing was certain. They'd never forget the morning Mark Wahlberg walked off their set. And more importantly, they'd never forget why. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had become something else entirely. It became a lesson in respect, in boundaries, and in standing up for yourself, even when the cameras are rolling. Mark Wahlberg had come to Good Morning America that morning as a guest. He left as someone who'd shown millions of viewers what it looks like to maintain your dignity in the face of disrespect. And Sam Champion learned that morning that being provocative isn't the same as being journalistic, that creating conflict isn't the same as asking tough questions, and that when you disrespect someone as genuine and grounded as Mark Wahlberg, the world will notice, and they won't be on your side.